Thank you. Today is Monday, June 7th, 2021, and the school committee will go into session at 5:43 p.m. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh.
Just a workshop, but we can do it.
Oh, do we do the Pledge of Allegiance later or let's do it now?
Just do it now.
Everybody's standing. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll start the workshop.
So I want to start off this evening with our workshop. We actually have two topics tonight, one being student dress and the other being graduation requirements. And starting off with student dress, I'm just going to pull up a document here real quick that I shared in the packet. Quick history. The middle school, as staff were trying to make sure students were prepared for future expectations, there was a revisit to hats and hoods as part of the dress code policy. And so students wanted to strike up a conversation about that and whether or not that was necessary anymore, with some connotations about hats and hoods and what that meant and how it connects back to different perceptions that people have about what does it mean to have on a hat or a hood, and is it some kind of inappropriate behavior? Does it limit one's ability to learn? Is it a tradition? Is it an expectation? Does it mean that a person with a hat or a hood is a threat of some sort? And so this conversation got started up at the middle school, as I said. I do have a couple of teachers here if they would like to join in the conversation, that I think did a good job facilitating the student conversation. Tried to guide the students of what to do if you want to affect a conversation and potentially change. And students did some legwork. They talked to peers. They did some surveys and got more information. And I didn't know if Mr. Parkinson and Mr. Bloy would like to go up to share anything related to some of the student work around this conversation.
I heard you talking about a red light. Do I?
You don't need to connect. Okay, you're all set. Yeah.
Okay. Hello, my name's Alston Parkinson. I'm a middle school student. I do literacy support. Can you hear me? I've been at the middle school for 6 years. And to start with, I was raised that when you enter a house or a building or a room, you take off your hat if you're a guy. That was the premise from what I started with. And working in an advisory class with my co-teacher, Michelle DeBlois, we started to explore more fully hats and hoods as it relates to our students at the school. And this issue became more and more of a hot button for them. And we quickly realized that we had something that was of deep engagement for them. And from that has resulted in our students making a truly professional effort at crafting an argument to change the hats and hoods policy at the school and in the district overall. They took it seriously. They interviewed a number of people, including Superintendent Langlis, our principal, Jana Mates. They were working with Bates students to help craft this as well. And I think they came up with a number of really good, solid reasons for why this should be changed. Do you want to add anything at the moment?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry. One of the biggest things that I think they realize is we've been at the middle school, we haven't had hats and hoods up until April 1st. It was so kids could feel not have to kind of the staff and the kids could have an environment when they came into school because of the pandemic to make everyone feel more comfortable. And on April 1st, there was a email that went out from Principal Mates saying that we would put the hat and hood policy back into effect. And all the kids kind of thought it was an April Fool's joke. And then they got upset because we, throughout the time that kids wore hats and hoods, they were very respectful. We didn't have any issues. And everything was going very smoothly. And they felt sort of like they had earned that right to have that since they were very respectful wearing hats and hoods. So the students also sent out student and teacher surveys, and Alston would like to read some of the results from the student surveys of the middle school.
So we received from the students 323 responses, which is about 45%. And the first thing that they indicated about hats and hoods and how it makes them feel is 36% said it made them feel safe. 21% said it was for sort of stylish reasons. But what I thought was astonishing was 85% said it made them feel more comfortable. Comfortable not just only with temperature control, maybe for them being in different classrooms that have different temperatures, but comfortable being in the school. Comfortable that for a number of reasons, maybe they wanted to cover up, not so much to disrespect the teacher or to hide, but kind of that they were not, that they hadn't gotten their hair right that day. Or maybe they had some acne breaking out on their forehead. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons for why they wanted it to be allowed to continue to wear it. We also had them answer a question, which was, in one word, how do you feel when you get told to take off your hats and hoods? A few of the responses, and many of these were multiple: anxious, forced, angry and frustrated, unsafe, my hood helps me a lot in a way. Our hair. Oops, I'm sorry, wait. I'm not the type of person who gets mad, but I do get annoyed when asked to. Mad, frustrated. I feel like it doesn't matter, but I have to respect my teachers. I will usually wear a hat that goes with my outfit, so having to take it off is kind of disappointing. One said, I don't like to, I'll take it off because I can't talk back. I'll get in trouble. And so that's their side of the equation. From a teacher's perspective, who deals with these kids every day, this process made me really think about this hats and hoods policy more deeply. And I realized I dreaded having to see a kid walk in with a hat and hood on their head, because the first thing I had to do was tell them, take it off. 40 to 45% of many of my classes are students of color. Almost invariably, they have a hat or a hood on. I realized it's not on because they're trying to disrespect me. It's what's making them comfortable. And for me to engage my students, if I don't have to have that battle at the beginning of the day or at any point during the day, then I'm in favor of getting rid of that issue. It's that simple. It is a hot button with the kids. And for 2 semesters, they wore hats and hoods without any problem. It seems to me that I think we can continue that experiment and see what we can do. There was 2 other sort of little numbers that I would like to share. One was that the question was, do you want hats and hoods to be allowed at LMS? 90% said yes. So there were some students that said, 10% that said no. However, when we asked the question, will you be responsible and respectful with the hats and hoods if they are allowed at LMS? The response was 100% that they would be respectful.
So one last thing to add is that if we look at the research, latest research about the brain and learning, it shows that students have to be comfortable in order to learn. And we have to have trusting relationships with our students in order them to feel comfortable to learn. And so to be put in a position of being an enforcer about an issue that should be a non-issue when it comes to learning, like the hats and hoods we've noticed this year has not affected the learning of students. Having a kid wear a hat or a hood has not changed their ability to learn until you ask them to take it off if they were comfortable wearing it, or you turn into, now I'm a police officer instead of a teacher, and I'm demanding that you follow this policy and do this. And that creates all kinds of power struggles with the students. And unfortunately, some implicit bias that is going on where teachers are asking students of color more than white students to comply to the policy. And so there have been a number of occasions where things have been filmed and kids are watching, and teachers have directed students of color to take off their hats or hoods and have not done the same for students that are white. And so I think there's a number of issues behind the hats and hoods policy that actually make it so it's not as equal for everyone and affects more marginalized students. For example, students who wear hijabs, they say it's sometimes nice to put a hoodie on and be like everyone else. You know, you don't recognize, because they wear headwear anyway, so they kind of stand out with their peers. Also, people of color, it's very time consuming to do their hair, and it takes a lot of time, and it's a great pride. And sometimes they don't have that time. They usually do it on a Sunday. It's very expensive. It takes a long time. And if they're getting past that time, they just want to throw a hood on so they're not embarrassed about their looks because they didn't have time to do their hair. So these are some of the things that affect some of the students greatly, where I think if we just had a more relaxed policy, this would be a non-issue. Are there any questions or concerns that you have that maybe we can address based on our findings?
I first just want to say thank you so much for this. I am, for all of the reasons you said and so many more, I'm a huge supporter of looking at any kind of rules or policies we have in place in our schools. And if they don't actually serve a purpose and they can lead to potential behavior issues and discipline and then a whole chain reaction of events, and just eliminate them before that's even an issue. Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Just real quickly, did want to share just a little more of the history of this too, and thank you both for your work. And for the students, I know today was the last day of school. It's also incredibly hot outside. That probably otherwise would have been here. They were phenomenal in the Zoom conversation, sharing their prepared thoughts and opinions in a wonderful professional way. It was great to see. I'd also add that not only did I participate in a conversation, but I felt it appropriate to share it with Member Ray, who's the chair of the school committee's policy subcommittee. And in that look, she also met with them, and she can share some of her experience. But it prompted a conversation at the subcommittee level, and Member Physics shared a policy that existed elsewhere. It's been to our management team, which is our principals and directors. They've provided input, and that component is what was shared in the memo. And I will add, and I know it's repeating some pieces of this, but I remember when I was a middle school principal, started there back in, I think, 2014. One of the things that I always try to do was, when you're asking a student to do something that was power struggle like, you always try to provide a reason why. And the story that I used to tell anecdotally was, this could go back as far as medieval times, that when you approached someone's home and you had headgear on, it was a sign of, you were there to fight or take the home, or what have you. So you would take off your headgear, your hat, your helmet, what have you, when you approached the house so that they knew that you were coming in peace. And as I've gone kind of more on my own journey in these conversations around bias and structures, I started thinking that what I was telling kids was, if you do this, you're a threat. And I had to really mull over that. It's a little bit vulnerable for me to be thinking that way, that not only did I think it, I thought it was a good way of telling kids why they need to, here's my reason for this power struggle. And it was an interesting conversation. And I never saw it interrupt learning. I never saw it be a threat to others. And the one argument that I often heard from people was, well, if there's an incident, how will the video capture the person doing the thing? I would argue that these hats and hoods are sometimes the most identifiable ways of identifying which kid was involved, because you can see them earlier, before, after, where people remember it. But we just spent a year wearing masks. And as you approach a school, you might take off your hat and your hood as you get into school. But until you do, you could have a hat, a hood, and a mask. And at no point in this year, to my knowledge, did we have a violent act because a student was wearing a hat or a hood. And so I had to challenge my own bias that was connected to that. And I just want to share that out loud, because students really got me thinking about why we should look at some of this language. But I also wanted the committee to know that this has been looked at by our management team. Member Physic was chimed in, and I know Miss Ray spoke with students and also had a conversation at the committee level, subcommittee level.
Ms. Wright, you can go ahead and speak.
Sorry, I didn't hear you calling on me if you were. Yeah, I just wanted to concur with what Jake was talking about, and a huge thank you to Mr. Sorry, I just have your first names written down, Alston and Michelle. Sorry to be so informal, for inviting me to join in on that conversation. I think the conversation that this started was centered around hats and hoods and about implicit bias through race. I think beyond that, as we started to dig into the actual policy that we have, there's also an opportunity for perceived gender bias as well. I know when I grew up, I would have been dress coded for the dress I'm wearing today because my shoulders are bare. And so when we look at the suggested language that Superintendent Langless has already vetted through administration, I think it takes us away from that racial bias, as well as away from gender or perceived gender bias as well. And so I really hope that we can make some movement on this. I think it still focuses that the individual responsibility is there and accountability is there, and it allows administrators to enforce that as they need to if a student is being disruptive with their dress or interrupting their own or other students' learning. But I think, to echo Chair Parks, the effort here is to make sure that there's a reason for these rules, and that might be the language is a little bit more open and allows students to have that self-expression, which I think is so important. As the middle school students were talking, I could feel myself being back in middle school and thinking about free speech and expression. And as you're learning about that, how that comes to fruition in the policies you have to follow. So I hope folks can jump on board with this, share some feedback, and we'll move it through the policy subcommittee and back to the full committee. Thank you.
Member Potvin.
All right, I guess I'm gonna throw some cold water on this. I'll be the opposing voice to this whole thing. As a school committee member, I sit here and I concentrate on our school level, our graduation rates, quality of our education, what we offer, getting kids engaged, doing things. We're sitting here talking about hats and hoods. Hats and hoods. Now, the first question I have right off the bat is, what reasonable purpose does wearing a hat or a hood in a school do? There is none. People have to wear clothes. All right? Hats and hoods, that's outside gear. All right, it blows my mind that we're even having this discussion and we're bringing it to the level that we are. We should be talking about education here. Hats and hoods, and I'll tell you something, growing up in Boston, the hats and the hoods were the identifier for gangs. And our gang atmosphere in Lewiston, Auburn is doing just fine. And guess where they focus on? They focus on young schools, young students, and identifying them. And guess where they go? They go to the places that have the highest level of poverty. We are sitting at 25% poverty. This is not the thing to do here. We need to have standards. We do not put something in the way that allows for activity that we don't want in the schools. Let's concentrate about math, science, and reading.
I just want to make a comment to that statement, and I totally agree. I mean, we are here to have the kids learn, and that's our most important piece. But in order to have the kids to learn and be engaged and be effective, you need to build a trusting relationship, and they need to feel safe. And this generation, when we ask the kids if their hats or hoods, that's part of how they dress now. They used to be affiliated with gangs and stuff, but that's in the past. And now they use it, that to them, to the students, that makes them feel comfortable. And it's not about, in order for them to get to the standards, in order for them to excel, they need to feel comfortable and build in relationships. It's a school, it's for learning. It's not for us to walk in and enforce upon them and put in the teachers in a role of being police officers. We're here to guide and facilitate learning for students. And this is a one gimme that we can offer autonomy and agency to kids that will give us a huge benefit.
Member Majoris Collins.
Rules against hats and hoods in school have always been dumb. They were dumb when I was in school. They were no doubt dumb when Member Potvin was in school, and they're dumb today. There's no reason in the world why our students shouldn't be able to wear what they want and feel comfortable in their own self-expression and in their own school environment. I really have a lot of admiration for what we've heard from students through this process. You know, I read with great interest the comments from our LMS students in the Sun Journal this weekend. And I just have a tremendous amount of pride in what they're doing. I'm impressed with them. And I think that we should always keep in mind that the one group of people that has more to do with our schools than anyone else and less control over our schools than anyone else are the students who attend them. And so we have heard in the newspaper and tonight and in conversations with students that this is something that matters to them, that it's a rule that it makes the school environment less welcoming and less free. And there's no earthly reason why we shouldn't go ahead and allow these kids to wear what they want. That's basic. This is America. This isn't, you know, some dictatorship where the government's going to tell you what to wear. And it's not acceptable to do that for kids in our schools. So I'm thrilled that we're getting this proposal tonight. I want to vote on it as fast as we can. And I want to make sure that when we come back in the fall, that kids at every school in Lewiston have the right to wear what they want to wear.
Member Physic.
So, can you hear me? So, from someone who's worked with kids and actually grew up right in the hood, the neighborhoods, in the mid-90s. So I kind of use this analogy. When I was coming up in high school and all the sports, basically, our coaches, we did something wrong, would throw a fit, maybe even get in our face, grab us by the shirt. basically treat us like we were in the Marine Corps. And as we know, we have kind of gotten away from that, even at all levels. Even at colleges now, coaches get fired if they do those things, because it's just not accepted practice nowadays. And so to bring this back to the policy where we're at right now is maybe what was acceptable, not acceptable back in the 90s, could be acceptable now. Now, I sat in on the class with the base college student, and they asked me to sit down. I told them straight out, I said, I'm really against hats and hoods, but sway me. Sway me, see what you can do, because I was in the military, and that's what it was. When you wore your military uniform, you took your hat off. When I was growing up in Boston, a lot of the rec centers, we couldn't wear a hat or hood because it was that negative connotation that nobody would take you seriously with a hat and hood on. And that you were nothing but a criminal if you wore a hat and hood. Which is funny, because in my high school I was at, it was actually a really lax policy, and a lot of us turned out pretty all right. And that was like during the real hardcore gang era. And nowadays, from someone who still talks to the people back on the streets, the hoods and hats and wearing a hat to represent what gang you're from is no longer really exist. So when I told the students to sway me, I said, well, that's what I would like to see. I'd like you to take a survey. I would like to see you take a survey of the students, take a surveys of the kids. I brought up the argument about if something happens in the school, and I was satisfied with that response. And so one of the things I did tell the kids, I go, you know what? I go, when you go to college, you're allowed to wear everything you wear, do anything you want. For someone who's been to college, I've seen some pretty interesting outfits in college. Even driving by Bates, I see some pretty interesting outfits. And someone who knows a couple of college professors and has talked to a few, they really don't care what you wear. All they care about is that you show up to class, don't disrupt the class, participate, do your work. If you're having a hard time, come see them during office hours. That's really all that they care about. So I started thinking, you go to some of the offices now, they're allowed to wear a hat. Professional call centers are allowed to wear a hat, because all they care about is that you come in, do your job, be respectful, don't be a fool, and leave and be a good employee. And that's across quite a bit of places like Verizon, places like credit card companies, like professional places probably minus Wall Street. So I think this is a turning point where, again, I understand the standards of wearing a hat. I do tremendously. But like anything else, and things change over time. And so I'm in full support of this. The only problem I would have with it is that you just can't wear a hat during graduation. You need to wear your graduation cap, because I think that's something that formal that you have achieved, that you should be wearing, that you should be proud of wearing your graduation cap, not a baseball hat. And I can see some people trying to challenge that. So that's why I said that. So that's my viewpoint on it.
If I could address committee member Potvin's concerns about it taking away time from education because we have low performance rates historically. This project originated in an advisory group, and by the time it was finished, I can look back now and say that this was probably the highest engagement project that I've been associated with. The students did very high level work with college students. They conducted themselves professionally with a wide range of audiences. They worked on research. They looked at Supreme Court cases involving freedom of expression. They came up with questions. Those questions were then polished, edited, They were run past principal mates for approval. They did research on other aspects of this. They looked at heavy-duty issues such as implicit bias, structural racism. They answered very difficult questions and handled their responses in a way that demonstrated that they had, especially the students of color, had been impacted by moments of racist actions towards them. And they shared those in classroom discussions in a way that allowed for a full discussion of that issue without blame being cast on any particular student or other group of students. It was a remarkable journey with them. And I think that they came away from it having learned how to write better, how to research, and how to present themselves in a multiple variety of forums.
Thank you. Ms. Whitlow?
So I want to address Mr. Potvin in the way that you conducted yourself and the way you talked to them. And I won't accept that. And I expect that the chair, next time that someone acts like that, cuts them off. If you have an issue with something, you can talk to them normal. I'm talking to you normal. I don't feel like we need to puff up our chest and try to intimidate people. That's not acceptable here. This isn't the first time that I've had to address that with you. And I wonder if there wasn't a woman up there, if you would have done that. If it was just one man up there, if you would have done that. And that bothers me a lot. And you can go on the record and I will say this every time. It's unacceptable behavior. And thank you both for not responding the way he responded to you. And you guys were both very professional, both of you. I don't want to see that again on this board. And I expect that whoever's in the chair position cuts it off. Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins?
I just wanted to say really quickly, I wasn't surprised at the 85% of students saying they're more comfortable. I have a rather large group of friends that are all women who are survivors of some pretty horrible things. And the one thing that they have said, almost every single one of them, about this past year with the masks is the level of anonymity it gives them. It gives them a step back from the hypervigilance that it's a daily occurrence for a lot of survivors. We need to remember that a lot of the students in our schools are survivors on one level or another of various things, whether it's poverty, hunger, dysfunctional homes, anything in my mind that we can do to make them more comfortable in their schools, when they can look at their teacher as a friend and not an adversary. I see that as something that's going to help. And it's something that I wouldn't consider borderline trauma-informed thinking. And I'm really proud of the students for their hard work on this and for reaching out the way they did, because it's a hard thing to do as a child, as a student, to step up to a teacher and say, hey, this is what's happening. Why is this happening? Let's talk about it. Let's change it. That's not an easy thing for a student to do. So I'm pretty impressed with our middle school right now.
Mr. Physick, did you have something to add?
So being married to a former teacher, probably, I think, one of the toughest elementary schools in Lewiston. She'd always come home and tell me about how one of her students came in, just start off with a bad day, and she would have to take extra time to de-escalate the situation to get them back on track. I actually seen one of the situations myself, one of the many times that I've volunteered in the classroom there. And she said a lot of it would be because somebody was having a bad day at home and they got to school and they wanted to keep their hood on. And instead of the teacher seeing a sourpuss face on the kid and pulling them aside and saying, hey, what's going on? The first thing is, well, take your hood off. And it happens probably more often than it probably should. And so, you know, it's just a way to go. And the one thing they said is, well, let's explore this further. Somehow it isn't working. It's really simple. You meet again and then you just go back to the other direction. But to go further with this and to really explore about the possibilities of change is good. And what the teachers were talking about, and I believe I got the term, was expeditionary learning. Okay, I've said on a lot of these, so make sure I got the term right, was really focusing on what to drive kids to learn about things more. Like I said, I think the middle school curriculum's come a long way, a tremendous way, and I'm pretty impressed. And it sounds like the kids did a lot of learning off of that, and that's the way that it's going to be going as far as the middle school goes, as far as curriculum goes, is expeditionary learning. So learning stuff that you feel passionate about, learning stuff that probably is going to be practical in life. It's just the way it's going. And it's not just Lewiston school system doing it. There's a lot of school systems doing it. Matter of fact, when I was in the mid 90s in college, aspiring to be a teacher, everything was like theme based. And then my kids go to school and it's like, there's no theme based, there's no this and that. And it's like, so I'm pretty impressed with what the middle school's done. Now, the part that I would agree with Member Potvin is, you know, we do need to be looking for avenues of, you know, how can we improve our math and science grades? And that's one of the things that, you know, I think after, because we've gotten all our curriculum committee, we've gotten all our standards and all, what was that about, all the way from K through 12. And that's something that we'll be looking on, is how can we help get the math grades up? How can we support teachers in getting the math and science grades about? So that's probably the job of the curriculum committee once I got it wrong, but so that's what I got.
I just want to end with one more piece. By allowing hats and hoods, you're not hurting anyone, but by not allowing them, a lot of kids will not feel safe and comfortable at school. So by adding this policy, it's not like you're taking anything away from the kids. If they don't want to wear a hat and hood, they don't have to, right? But by not allowing kids to wear it and by continuing this kind of criminalization of students, like most in the teacher surveys, most of the teachers said when they disagreed with changing the policy, it's because they didn't feel that they could recognize someone on camera when they committed a crime. And that broke my heart, because we're not a prison, we're a school. We're here to help kids grow and learn and to be the best people that they can be. And how many kids actually do something bad at school? So you're going to penalize 800 kids in the middle school on the fact that you want to be able to identify them when they do something bad. And I'm just going to ask Jake to share what you shared with us in class when you were a principal or when you were a teacher, because the same thing that I have. I can recognize my students because I have a relationship with them. If they walk in with a hat and hood and a mask on, and you ask me, who is that? I can tell you who it is. And for the kids to listen and hear what the teachers said on the teacher survey, that broke their hearts. Because they said, we can tell each other apart. Why can't you? And why do you think that we're all going to be that bad? So I think this policy actually does more hurt and more harm by allowing it to stay in place than by giving kids the option to wear hats and hoods. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for listening.
Any further comments? Member Damon, and then I'll go back to Member Potvin.
Well, been a long time, a very long time since I was in middle school. But I think, if nothing else, the one thing that this points out, and is from the student's perspective, is that what we have to do as a school district is we have to also change the culture of our staff. If there's some inherent bias that's just sort of there as an undercurrent, then we've failed by not allowing the staff to grow out of that. And hopefully, if nothing else, this starts the conversation that we need to work with the staff and help the staff so that this doesn't become something that's more insidious than it is now. Hats and hoods, if you'd ever seen my son, he has a head of hair that would rival almost anybody, and he used to fight with it all the time. He's worn a hood ever since he was in high school, and it just is part of him. So I don't have any problem with this being changed. In fact, I think this is a huge step forward, not only for the students and for every student that's going to end up at the middle school, but a chance for the staff as well. If it reduces conflict, that has to be a positive.
Member Potvin.
So I just want to mention two words: professionalism and discipline. And when kids come to school for their 12 years in their local school department, besides education, I think there's attributes that the school acts to develop, not to enforce. I don't like the word enforce, but to develop. There's nothing that strikes me more. I went to private elementary school. Everything I learned from K through 8. I went to public high school where they were wearing their hats and their hoods. Some were wearing this, some were wearing that. Some were carrying this, some were carrying that. There was no unity. Everybody was doing their own thing. When I went to private school, there was things deeper than education that were being taught, that we carried away. And I didn't see any of that in my 4 years in high school. With this, I guess it hits hard to me because, and to Member Whitlow's concern, it's nothing to do with you guys. It has to do with the whole thing, as we've struggled to try to bring this school department up a couple levels. And what do we focus on? And it's those moments that I remember back sharply, where it just seemed like anything goes. And I guess I'm just on the angle that I think that what's next? Do we have to let students have their cell phones because it makes them feel good? What else? Umbrellas? I don't know. And I guess that's where I'm going, because really when you start on this level, it opens up this question mark of why. There's no context to like tie it in to education. And I hear what you're saying about studies and the results and stuff like that. And I'm sure for some it makes a difference. I'm thinking about my cousins and my nephews that went to this school system, and they were intimidated by the groups that on the outside were wearing hats. I used to hear that. The identity of maybe not gang, but groupings and the intimidation of that. And I guess I look at it as a viewpoint that I want one whole unit to work together, without any kind of identifiers, period. And the discipline of coming to school, it's like wearing a uniform at work, wearing what is it they wear in the hospital gowns. I mean, you become one, you're on a mission. And that's what I kind of want to try to see happen with the school department, is a mission that everyone's tied into. And I just think this doesn't go there. So say that.
I'd like to follow up on that and say that one of the biggest things that are, well, let me back up first. So I think that the perception of wearing hats and hoods and the reason policies like this are in place is because it's perceived as disrespectful. If somebody walks into a room and they have a hat on and they don't take it off, it's disrespectful. And so I think that the intention of these policies was to try to teach children respect. And I think that that's one of those key things that are taught in like private schools and settings like that. And I would argue that at this point, the way things have shifted to not allow, I don't know how to say this the right way. If a student walks in a classroom and they have a hat on and a teacher approaches them and is essentially picking a battle with a student who's doing nothing wrong at all and starting what could blow up into an issue that's going to lead a student going to the office and getting something on their record and all kinds of perceived ideas about them, I think that that's disrespectful to our students. I think teaching the students that they have a voice, allowing them to express what they've expressed through this whole process, has taught them that we respect them as much as we want them to respect us. And so I think that, contrary to what you're saying, I think allowing these students to explain that times have changed, it's no longer seen as disrespectful, and allowing them to, I'm not saying this the right way at all, but what I'm trying to say is I think it's disrespectful to have a policy in place that serves no purpose and to argue it. And if the goal is to create unity among the school, having this so that all students can choose what they want to wear and how they want to express themselves creates that unity because it eliminates those perceived biases and those perceived things. So if you had students in your family that were assuming that kids who wore hats outside of school were the scary kids, they probably didn't have much interaction with those kids and that was a perceived bias. They perceived that those kids were scary. But if every kid in school walks in wearing a hat, that's going to eliminate that fear right there because they're going to know that all kids are just wearing hats. It's not about some other message or some other them versus us kind of thing. So I think that allowing all of the students to make that choice for themselves will eliminate that separation and create more unity. And I didn't say any of that the way it sounded in my head, but thank you. Member Majerus Collins.
So obviously member Potvin is in the extreme minority on this issue of folks who have spoken so far. And, you know, I want to say that even though I think that on this particular issue, he's wrong, that, you know, he's got his right to express his perspective on it and we'll obviously have a vote eventually. But I do want to push back on this idea that, you know, the way to the best way to educate students is through conformity, right? That is a perspective that some people have. It's a driving perspective behind things like military schools. But I don't think it's the right perspective. I think that we live in a rich and vibrant society where people have an intrinsic right to express themselves, to be who they want to be, to aspire to do anything that they want to do, and that we should reflect those values in our schools. You know, I think it's wrong to look at kids like potential gang members or future criminals. And I give this committee a lot of credit for having taken what I would argue are bolder and more significant steps away from that line of thinking than any other district in the state over the last 18 months. And this is another opportunity to move in that direction, to recognize that our kids are fundamentally good, that they fundamentally have something to contribute that is individual and unique to them, and that we ought to be giving them as much freedom as we possibly can to express themselves, to learn, to grow, to challenge themselves and their peers. That to me is what a great education is all about. You know, and obviously maybe there are families who want to approach things differently and they'll have their own options outside of public schools. But, you know, I just think that that's the mentality we ought to have about our kids. And it can be advanced by providing them the right to wear what they want on their heads.
Member Willow.
Look, I can disagree and not think Mr. Potman is right for the way he treats other people, but I will never say that he is wrong for stating his opinion. And I think that we need to respect each other on this board and not call each other out and tell each other they're wrong for their opinion. That's not how we work as this board. I don't know what is going on, but I'm pretty sure that my email earlier today to all of you to state that we need to start communicating and working together and just being on the same page is important. It's important for individuals to work as a unit to get things done. So I'm going to apologize for Mr. Kiernan for telling you that you're wrong for having an opinion.
Are there any attendees that would like to comment, members of the public? Oh, we don't normally do that. Okay. Yep. Alicia's hand is up. I'm like, wait, I see a hand up.
Yeah, sorry, sneaky. So I just wanted to say, I appreciate all the feedback that members of the committee gave tonight. I think the next step, Superintendent Langlis, I can't see your face, but I hope you're nodding, would be that we'll take another run at what the policy language is. I think we're just going to amend by substitution, and then we would bring that back to the full committee for a first and second reading just to get it updated and into the policy manual. Again, I just want to give the credit where this is due. This policy was not on the policy subcommittee's radar, nor I think the school committees, until these students and these educators brought it forward. And I just think that's just so incredible. And to not only hear, but see the level of engagement from middle school students on a Zoom. I mean, just incredible work. And I hope we hear more things like this in the future. It was great to bring it to our attention. I know we're going in a little different direction with the policy, but achieving the first set out goal, and I think doing even better for students. So thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
I wanted to thank you on behalf of Mr. Parkinson and I and all the students for giving us this chance to come and speak. And thank you so much for offering your feedback and opinions. I want to open an invitation to all of you if you want to come to the middle school or be involved with any of our expeditionary learning projects or advisory, you're more than welcome. Please just feel free to email one of us, and you're more than welcome to come in and see all the great work that we're doing. So thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
The second part of the workshop is the graduation requirements. All right, Mr. LeBlanc will be presenting. While he walks up to the mic, I just wanted to say for anyone who's listening at home, we have new microphones tonight. So if we're stumbling a little bit, it's because we're trying to navigate these. And we apologize in advance for any technical difficulties we experience sitting here.
Good evening. Thank you for allowing us to come to the board tonight to talk about graduation requirements in Lewiston High School. I just got a slide that is, after this last discussion, I feel like the bridesmaid, not the bride. But we'll try to be as efficient here as possible. I do want to point out that two other high school staff members, Mr. Gish and Ms. Urgis, came tonight on this topic. When I met with you last fall, we made some changes to the graduation requirements this spring because we felt that given the fact that school was out of session last March, that no education really took place through the summer. And then all of a sudden we're into a hybrid model this fall, that it presented a kind of an insurmountable task for some kids. And what I mean by that is whatever you do in a school, wherever you set your standards, whatever your expectations are, they often are easy for some students and not so easy for others. It doesn't mean that the answer is always to lower the standard. I think over my career, I found that having a standard is actually the way to do it, but to give students additional time and additional support as they need it to meet those standards is more the appropriate way. But in this circumstance, given everything that was going on, we felt it was appropriate to recommend a lowering of the graduation requirements for the class of 2021. What I did from there, as I told you at that time, is I put a committee together at the high school. You should have a copy of this document. It lists the people that were involved. And we wanted to look at this in depth. And I'm just going to ad lib here for a minute because I know you folks can all read this document. What this committee came back with was that there is an extreme comfort level with the current graduation requirements at Lewiston High School. And the reason for that is that we feel that one of our missions is to produce well-rounded students who are exposed not only to reading, writing, math, and science, but also the arts, also health and physical education, and other areas. So the recommendation of that group was that we maintain the current graduation requirements as they exist. Now, one of the caveats to that, however, is as we begin to look at changing populations, especially immigrant populations with language acquisition issues, that it's probably important that we begin to look at alternative paths and alternative ways, additional support to accomplish the standards that we set. So you can see here the recommendation of this committee, which was made up of the people listed. This was also shared with the entire faculty at Lewiston High School. Then it was processed in what I call a seesaw method. This committee met, discussed issues. We published minutes, shared it with the whole faculty, asked those folks to give input to the people on the committees. You can see all the areas are represented. Asked those people to bring it back to the committee. The committee worked on that, came back with another draft or whatever, and came up with these requirements. We did that a total of 3 times. So what you're seeing is not only the work of this committee, but it really embodies real input from the entire faculty and staff at Lewiston High School. The other thing that we did is we went out and looked at other high schools to look at their requirements. And our requirements are no more strenuous and no more difficult than any of the other. Actually, these graduation requirements that we're recommending are pretty similar to most of the other high schools. And so we feel this represents an attainable standard. We think it represents a standard that does provide students with exposure to different content areas and a broad-based education. And we feel very comfortable with this as the continued graduation requirements at the high school, with the provision that we need to look. I will give you an example. I think one of the things that we need to look at is we have a lot of students in our schools, and I'm talking high school now, that come to the high school with very limited English skills. And so how realistic, if a student starts with us in kindergarten and comes all the way up through 12 grades, whether that student comes from an English-speaking family or a non-English speaking family, how does that student's educational experience match up to someone who shows up here when they're 16 years old, 17 years old, and comes from a background where they do not speak the English language? Their parents may not even be literate in their own language. That student is an incredible disadvantage. So what we're recommending is not that we lower the standard and lower the expectation, but that we find ways, alternative paths, alternative instruction, even in alternative courses that will allow students an opportunity to get content, maybe not so much through a literacy-based format, which is what is the limitation that really affects a lot of these students. So that being said, that's the recommendation that we are bringing to the school committee at this time. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure that Ms. Urgis, Mr. Gish, who are also on that committee, would be happy to answer questions as well.
Member Whitlow.
Thank you. So I know, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago or so, I had mentioned that to put on the agenda at some point for future discussion about a non-credit based diploma, and if that's something that we would at least have a discussion about, I guess. And the reason I say that it is, you know, I've had folks that work with groups of students that have a hard time with school, and it's hard for them to get credits. And that was just something that was brought up, and I don't know enough about it, so I'm not proposing that that's what we do. I just really want to have a discussion on what that would look like, and if we adopted this, how would that change if we wanted to have a discussion later, I guess. So I want to throw that out there.
I guess my initial thinking is to be creative in certain ways, and at the bottom part of this memo that Principal LeBlanc provided after working with his teams, it recommends the future consideration be given to the creation of elective credits through alternative structures and paths to be reviewed, developed, and offered for adoption. So part of that, he also says community service, internships, project-based learning, portfolio-based learning experiences, which I think might touch on what you're talking about, not to not have an expectation, but if a student has an experience that might qualify or meet certain standards of learning, how could that be demonstrated a bit differently? And there's also language learner focused experiences and interdisciplinary course offerings. So again, keeping that good standard, but finding different pathways for students to demonstrate what they know and are able to do.
And if we had like credit-based diploma, could you have a non-credit based diploma? Could you have two separate pathways? And
My understanding is I think locally that you could have multiple things as long as they meet the criteria that the state has established. So for example, Poland is more standards specific than say we are by the way they report individually. But they still have those standards for reporting, and the state still requires that. And don't quote me on the language. I don't know if anybody else here wants to chime in, but the language of the requirements that the state are connected to main learning results, Common Core, next gen, different areas topically, but there's the language that those criteria have been demonstrated. Karen or Gus, or I don't know if Caitlin, you want to add to that as far as the language? Do you mind going up? Yeah, so people can hear you at home. Thank you.
so we currently do have a credit-based diploma. Sometimes schools use credits as like a seat time equivalent. I would say that at the high school, through our process of going through all of the proficiency-based experience that we had over the last several years and finally landing on a credit-based diploma, it's not so much seat time equals credit in some cases, because we have a school year and the school year is broken into semesters or year-long classes. There is some connection to seat time, but there have also been times where we have a student may do an independent study with a teacher, and standards are identified and credit is awarded and approved and awarded based on what the student has completed. So I think within the structure that we have, The awarding of credits, really the final decision lays with the principal of the school. And so as long as the principal was to approve whatever the, culminating thing was that the student wanted to do, you could do more project-based, experience-based things. And we do have that happening in some of the programs in our district.
Member Physics.
I would just
Oh,
add
sorry.
something to that. It's kind of a well-kept secret, but the way the educational law is in the state of Maine at the high school level, the high school principal does have the authority to approve and grant not only credit, but meeting graduation requirements in different ways. And I'll give you an example. In my prior tenure at Lewiston High School, one of the last years I was there, I had several students come to me who were taking a fire science course. They had been junior firefighters and with a fire department, and they were actually taking the Maine Department of Transportation firefighter course. And they brought in the curriculum and showed me the curriculum and what was involved with, science, math, and all kinds of other stuff. And we did award that again for a credit equivalency for students. So the only reason I'm bringing that up is that those possibilities currently exist. And in some situations, we have done those. Like she said, this year I actually, Mr. Gish has done a number of independent studies that we have improved that maybe weren't part of the traditional curriculum, but covered standards, learning standards within what we offer for a diploma expectations. So I just thought I'd add that to what Ms. Urgis said.
Member Physics.
And I don't know if this falls into that. So if a kid like has an IEP, right, and they've taken, let's say they've taken at least in 2 years of algebra, that counts. Would a math, I know you guys offer a math class that's more geared toward like real life scenarios like checks and all that. Is that gonna actually count towards a math credit? Or does the parent or a student have to file like a permission or get approval for that to figure out as a math credit?
That's actually a very good question. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there that courses like Algebra 2 are required for graduation. They are not. We offer specific courses in our curriculum. And if I say something that's wrong, come on over here. Like Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, Calculus, and that type of stuff. There are also other math classes that students would take. In the question of an IEP student, what they would probably do is they would look at the math courses that we offered, and they would put in specific accommodations and other supports that this student would need to be successful. Now, the thing you have to be careful about with special education is there are students that are mainstreamed into special education taking a mainstream course. And that's when you're going to deal with accommodations in that. There's other students who might be in a self-contained special education environment. And what they do to meet those requirements would probably be specified more by the IEP and the IEP team. Did I get that right? Yeah. So the answer is different depending on what you're talking about. So when it comes to mainstream classes, they would provide accommodations. Now, one thing an IEP team can't do, for instance, the state of Maine says you have to have a course in U.S. history. They can't, that team can't say the student doesn't have to do that. I mean, that's a state mandated requirement. What they can do is say, this is how this student is going to meet that requirement, through the IEP process.
So not to really put you on the spot, but so kind of answer my question. If let's just say a kid who has an IEP is in the mainstream and is one who struggle with math and all, it's all documented and this and that. Are there pathways to take in a a non-traditional math class besides geometry? I guess is what I'm asking.
Yes, there is. What's specific? I know we have a couple of math classes that are not what we would consider traditional.
So we've worked with the math department over the last several years to develop a sequence of math classes or an offering of math courses that help students leave with solid math skills instead of pushing everyone through to get to algebra 2 with shaky math skills. That's not what we want. So I think one of the classes you referred to is, we call it Math for Daily Living. No, Math for Adult Life. Sorry, I said the wrong name. You're working on the schedule a lot right now for next year, and there's lots of class names in my head. And that class didn't run this year because of numbers of students needing it, but it will run next year, and it is a core credit for math. So part of the process that I go through with the principal, whether it was Jake when he was there or Mr. LeBlanc this year, when teachers propose new courses, we ask them, what are the academic standards that this class is going to meet? What kind of credit would this class be awarded? Sometimes it's a half a credit of elective because it meets some standards within a content area, but not enough to qualify for a full credit or a graduation requirement credit. But in the case of this math class, it does meet the graduation requirement credit.
Member Potvin.
So Gus, right now, the seniors that graduated this year graduated with a minimum of how many credits? Because we changed that for this year, correct? 22. 21, okay. So what I get a lot from is the concerns from parents of the juniors, the sophomores, and the freshmen who have endured the setbacks of COVID, and where struggles might be there, trying to adapt to the online learning. Are we jumping too fast? Are we not giving them, those 3 grades, an opportunity to catch up, shall we say? Where we're allowing 21 for this graduating class, but we're jumping right back to 24 when those 3 classes might not be whole right now?
Well, I want to take you back, if your memory will permit, back to when I presented to you in February. One of the things we did when we made the recommendations in February is that we looked, actually, Caitlin did the lion's share of this work. We looked at specifically where students in different classes would lie in that graduation path, seniors, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, whatever. And pretty much what we found was that it was the senior class that had really been shortchanged last year that had the greatest amount of risk towards graduation. They were the class that was missing credits, requirements. And last year when they closed the school, a decision was made that no students who had any electives in that second semester would get any credit for it. So not only were that group shortchanged from that, they also did not have the opportunity to finish some of their core classes. But who did that with you, Caitlin? You and Jay? Mr. Dufour and Ms. Urgis went down through the juniors, seniors, the juniors and sophomores at that time, did not find the same pattern of missing credits of students who were behind the curve. For instance, we always look at, a freshman to be on track should have 5 credits. A sophomore should have 9, and a junior should have, at the end of the senior year, they should have 17 as a minimum. So when they looked at that, they did not find that to be a case in the junior and sophomore years or the freshman years. I got that right, didn't I? Yeah.
Okay.
So we did look at that issue. We just didn't throw that to the wind. We did look at that issue because we were concerned about that. The only other thing I want to just draw to your attention, remind you, we're not asking you to approve new graduation requirements. these are the graduation requirements that have been in place for a number of years at the high school. We're just recommending that we revert to them at this time.
Member Majoris Collins.
I just want to clarify, we voted only to change the class of 2021 graduation requirements. So the proposal that you're bringing to us tonight doesn't actually require any action at any point by the school committee. If we do nothing, these are the graduation requirements going forward.
I would say you're accurate. I do like the good work here, and from a workshop perspective, to have a better understanding of the context of the committee and their thinking, but also I, in particular, really like the bottom half of this memo from Principal LeBlanc that talks about the future considerations that include multiple pathways for students to demonstrate their learning.
You can continue, Member Majoris Collins.
Yeah, that makes total sense to me, and potentially to address some of Member Potvin's concerns, and also to return to see where we're working on with the second half of this memo. Could we potentially, or could a future school committee potentially hear again about this, I don't know, maybe same time next year? Does that seem like it makes sense? Just sort of where things are?
Well, it won't be me. But if, I mean, I've shared this with Mr. Langlis, and we'll be sharing it with Mr. Putnam to let him know this work. And my assumption is, obviously, the school committee can review this stuff anytime you want. But I really firmly believe in the second half of that. And I've been doing this a long time, and I've seen a lot of changes, and I've seen the changes in this community. I worked here for 15 years, and then I left for 7, and I've been back. So we're talking about, I got some history in Lewiston. And I think that second half on the second page is really an important piece to look at. More so than, one of the things I would tell you is when you maintain a standard, you maintain it for everybody. When you lower a standard, and you think you're helping one group, you're lowering the standard for everybody. I will tell you, these two people remember it. I don't know if Mr. Langlis does, but when I came to Lewiston High School in 2006, I found an eligibility policy that I felt was not a policy at all. And I came back to the school committee with a standard, and I had school board members tell me, you can't do this. Kid's going to drop out of school. It's going to increase failure rates. It's going to ruin our athletic teams. And I will tell you that the actual result of that is that fewer kids were ineligible. More of our athletes were passing classes. The number of athletes participating actually went up 18%. And none of the things that we thought were going to happen did. If you set a reasonable standard, kids are resilient. They'll meet it. Some kids need additional time and support. But I don't think we should be afraid of having high expectations and high standards for our children. As a matter of fact, I think they deserve that from us. And I think every time we lower standards and we lower expectations, we sometimes think we're doing a favor, but we're not. I think we're hurting all of our kids. And I'm sorry for politicizing, but it's something I feel pretty strongly about.
Any other comments from the board members? Okay, thank you both very much.
Thank you very much for listening to us. Appreciate it.
Is anyone opposed to taking a very quick 5-minute break? Nope. Okay, we'll take a really quick break. Shoot. We're gonna call the meeting to order now at 6:30 PM, or actually it's 7:09 PM. It was supposed to be 6:30. Agenda item number 2 is the school committee member introductions, and we'll start with Ms. Paquette.
Good evening, Karen Paquette, Assistant Superintendent.
Bruce Damon, Ward 1.
Elgin Physical Ward 2.
Kieran Majerus Collins, Ward 3.
Jake Langless, Superintendent.
Megan Parks at large.
Tanya Whitlow, Ward 4.
Linnea Hawkins, Ward 5.
Ron Potvin, Ward 6.
Alicia Ray, City Council Representative.
Thank you all. Agenda item number 3 is an announcement from member Physic.
Good evening, everybody. I am announcing that I'm resigning from the school committee. I've been offered a position as the varsity basketball coach, which I accepted, obviously pending you guys' approval. On the way out, I like to advocate for a few things on my way out the door. I hope to see that we have kids back in school, and obviously, depending on what the guidelines are, but just really making it happen to get our kids back in school, whether we have to rent 4,000 buildings to make it happen. That's being a little facetious, but I think you get my point. Get our special ed program where it should be. Please keep working on the restorative justice and equity in our schools. Please create a culture if a teacher speaks up, there won't be retribution. And please work towards keep supporting our teachers and collaborating with them whenever possible. Obviously, these aren't anything new. It's stuff that I've talked about since I've been with the school board. I first like to thank Mayor Kier for having the opportunity to serve our school district and our community. I'd like to thank my family who have put up with me being absent because of meetings, whether in person or in Zoom, or had to put up with me venting on why things can't be fixed as quick as I would like them to. Now they're going to have to hear about basketball all the time. I'd like to thank the staff and the people that helped make a school building run. I'd like to thank the teachers for navigating through tough times and I know a lot of it was tough times from the countless emails and from being on the phone with a lot of them and some in tears over this whole past school year. I truly appreciate your hard work during these times. I'd like to give it a shout out to the students for their work and trying to learn in a conventional way. And I know that just from having a student of my own who's had struggled, but just kept being resilient to keep pushing through. I'd like to thank parents for their work this year. A lot of responsibility fall on their shoulders as far as academics go. And so I'd like to appreciate their hard work. And we've all seen the Facebook videos of the funny videos of the parent sometimes teaching at the school and how it was a great appreciation for teachers. And to the people in the room, school board committee members, I'd like to appreciate your hard work and keep advocating for our students. I know I will, whether it's the players I coach or the subcommittees and other committees such as curriculum, policy, equity, restorative justice. I still don't plan on making a contribution to our kids in our community. Remember, we're all Lewiston.
Thank you, member Physic. It has been a pleasure. I think I probably speak for everyone when I say it's been a pleasure to serve with you. You have come forward with integrity from day one, dedication out on the streets, talking to people, talking to parents, even if it was people who had a different opinion from you, you've always heard both sides and made very unbiased decisions. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 4, the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any members would like set aside? Member Majerus Collins.
We did this at the last meeting, and I noticed that there isn't a change, but that may be intentional. The minutes from May 5th. And this is specifically vote 3. We were unable to settle this because we couldn't speak with Member Potvin, but now that he's here, I want to make sure that my memory aligns with his, in that there was a motion made to approve reduction to the school budget that shifted more of the money towards relief funds and less of the money coming from the fund balance. It failed 1-8. It was Member Potvin's motion. I strongly suspect he was the person who voted for it. It's currently listed as my having voted for it, which is not what happened. I just wanted to make sure that that was what had happened. Okay, so if we could, by unanimous consent, just agree that we're gonna change that, then I'm fine with the May 5th minutes. That it was Member Potvin who voted in the affirmative on vote 3 and
Vote
not
3.
me.
Member Potter, does that sound accurate to you? Thank you very much.
All right. All other items on the consent agenda are approved. Agenda item number 5 is public input. Members of the public may address the school committee for up to 3 minutes on non-agenda items now and on agenda items later. Comments that pertain to staff, personal matters, or a student issue should be directed to the superintendent or the appropriate staff member of Lewiston Public Schools. Public comments shall be directed to the school committee and be brief, not repetitive, and related to the matter at hand. Before starting, please state your name, address, and/or affiliation to Lewiston Public Schools. Are there any members of the public, either here in the audience right now or online, that would like to speak? Seeing none, we will move along to agenda item number 6, to receive and approve a resolution request to denounce racism in Lewiston Public Schools. And I believe Miss Aisha Hall will be presenting.
As Ms. Hall is making her way to the podium, there are a number of people here with her to support this effort. But I also want to say, as superintendent, I fully support the effort. So much of the work that we have to do comes back to anchors and what are the things that we're going to anchor our work in. And this resolve and efforts around it continue to come up. I think we're in a unique place with a unique opportunity. And I know that they have some pieces to share, but I wanted to share that I'm also in support of what they're sharing in this resolve and the work that's around it.
So, hi, everyone. We've done this before, right? We had a resolution and it went amazing. But one thing that was missing from that experience was this. Like, I don't know, you can't see on the screen, but as I'm seeing everybody walking in, it just gave me a sense of relief that making these big steps, because this is big, this is America. When you put things in writing, it makes a difference. And to have this much support from the educators and our equity leaders is what I've been saying. To see this much leadership in our district right now, and it's the last day of school, they could all go home. I actually video recorded the resolution so that teachers and educators would have that opportunity to have participation in this process, and they still came. I really trusted. It's late, it's hot, it's fine, and people still came. So I just wanted to say that first, and to thank you all that were here, and thank all of you online that are watching, that participated, that helped write the cover letter that was once my own words. And it feels so much better to know that I didn't do all of this on my own, that I, of course, was at the helm of this process, but that this isn't my work, this isn't my voice, this is a collective opinion and beliefs of the people that are standing up here and that helped me today. So thank you. And I have a cover letter, and then we'll share our reading of that resolution together as a team. Thank you in advance. Dear Lewiston Public Schools Committee, thank you for your leadership during this challenging time. Given the diverse community we are proud to have in Lewiston Public Schools, the Lewiston Public Schools Equity Resource Team respectfully submits the attached resolution, or spoken resolution, to denounce racism and move toward building anti-racist schools and communities. We are experiencing an increasing diverse student body in LPS. In 2014 to 2015, 37% of our students identified as BIPOC, which means Black, Indigenous, people of color. In 2020, 2021, 47% of our students identified as Black, Indigenous, people of color. 26.1% of our student body is also identified as being English language learners. Though our student body is changing rapidly, our achievement and behavior data suggests that these students are less successful than their white peers. This is a trend not only in Lewiston, but across the country. Research overwhelmingly demonstrates that racism or systemic oppression of a group of people based on race has significant negative impacts on health, achievement, and safety of ethnic minority individuals. Our young people, educators, and families of all backgrounds must be able to engage in and access positive educational opportunities that acknowledge and celebrate all aspects of their identity. By prioritizing anti-racism in our schools, we are prioritizing a culture of belonging in our schools, leading to success and well-being of all of our students. We offer the following resolution denouncing racism in the Lewiston Public School Committee for the Lewiston Public School Committee to adopt. If you or our committee members have any questions about this request or resolution, you can email me, ahall@Lewiston Public Schools. You can also talk to your superintendent. Thank you for your consideration of this important request, and we'll turn it over to our screens where we'll be presenting the resolution as an equity team. School staff members to read the resolution request to denounce racism. Thank you in advance for your time.
Whereas racism and racial discrimination threaten human development because of the obstacles which they pose to the fulfillment of basic human rights, to survival, security, development, and social participation.
Whereas racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related imperialism have been shown to be attitudes and behaviors that are learned. Racism
racism has been shown to have negative cognitive, behavioral, affective, and relational effects on both child and adult victims nationally and globally, historically and contemporarily.
Racism has been shown to increase anxiety, depression, self-defeating thoughts, and avoidance behaviors, and is linked to a host of medical complications in ethnic minority individuals.
Whereas racism has been shown to negatively affect ethnic minority children's academic and social development, self-esteem, and personal feelings of efficacy.
Racism and poverty are inextricably linked, and both are risk factors for high levels of emotional
Can we
stress.
pause?
Whereas racism intersects with gender in ways that result in different experiences of inequality by transgender, gender non-binary, and cisgender youth and adults.
Whereas racism negatively affects the cognitive and affective development of members of the dominant group by perpetuating distorted thinking about the self and members of marginalized or oppressed groups.
Back it up so they can hear it. Sorry.
We're showing up as a team, Lewiston Public School staff members, to read the resolution request to denounce racism. Thank you in advance for your time.
Whereas racism and racial discrimination threaten human development because of the obstacles which they pose to the fulfillment of basic human rights to survival, security, development, and social participation.
Whereas racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related imperialism have been shown to be attitudes and behaviors that are learned.
Whereas racism has been shown to have negative cognitive, behavioral, affective, and relational effects on both child and adult victims nationally and globally, historically and contemporarily.
Whereas racism has been shown to increase anxiety, depression, self-defeating thoughts, and avoidance behaviors, and is linked to a host of medical complications in ethnic minority individuals.
Whereas racism has been shown to negatively affect ethnic minority children's academic and social development, self-esteem, and personal feelings of efficacy.
Whereas racism and poverty are inextricably linked, and both are risk factors for high levels of emotional distress.
Whereas racism intersects with gender in ways that result in different experiences of inequality by transgender, gender non-binary, and cisgender youth and adults.
Whereas racism negatively affects the cognitive and affective development of members of the dominant group by perpetuating distorted thinking about the self and members of marginalized or oppressed groups.
Whereas racism can promote anxiety and fear in the dominant group members whenever they are in the presence of or anticipating the presence of marginalized group members, often thus leading to acts of hostility and aggression toward ethnic minority individuals.
Whereas both active racism and passive acceptance of race-based privilege disrupts the mental health of both perpetrators and victims of racial injustice.
Therefore, be it resolved that Lewiston Public Schools condemn racism in all its forms for its negative psychological, social, educational, and economic effects on human development throughout the lifespan. Be it further resolved that LPS schools will pursue diverse racial and ethnic staff representation, call upon all influencers and decision-making authorities throughout our school district to eliminate processes and procedures that perpetuate racial injustice in policy, practice, professional development training, and classroom instruction, call upon all Lewiston Public School stakeholders and community members to speak out against racism and take proactive steps to prevent the occurrence of overtly and covertly racist acts, and promote professional learning communities focused on the alleviation of racial and ethnic injustice. Thank you. So thank you. And thank you for your patience. And I really believe that it was important enough to say it twice. And even more so, we have folks that have something to say about this resolution that's coming from them personally. So if you bear with us for just a little bit longer, we appreciate your time.
Dave, I just want to verify the mic is still working over there. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks. Good evening. I'm Tiffany Demarest. I'm one of the assistant principals at Montello School. I'm also one of the members of the equity resource team, so that's why I'm here today. I just wanted to briefly say a few things and start with a quote by Toni Morrison that says, "If you are free, you need to free someone else. If you have some power, then your job is to empower someone else." And so as administrators, this is one of the roles that I take really seriously. I know that I have a seat at the table of decision making, so that's part of my job. And I also acknowledge that that's a privilege that's inherent in my role. Because of this, I think as administrators, we really have an important obligation to empower others and ensure that students, families, and community members also have seats and voices in that decision-making process, as Aisha mentioned in the resolution. So that involves listening to the different stakeholders in our community, acknowledging the harm that we've maybe caused in some of our practices, and committing to do better, because as Maya Angelou says, when we know better, we do better. And I think we know better now in Lewiston, and we're really working to do better in our practices. And thanks to Aisha's guidance and leadership, she's really created this collective effort to get a lot of voices at the table. So it's not just administration, it's not just teachers, it's not just one part of the community, but it's really bringing people together and listening and hearing what they have to say and making that part of our work in improving our practice. So that is why this resolution is important to me in my role. It's a launching point for really analyzing our policies and practices that we have in place and eliminating those that are perpetuating harm. So we know there are discrepancies in our discipline data and our academic data, and we really need to analyze that as a community and really look more deeply into that. I think this resolution is a launching point, so it's really the start in writing it down, like Aisha said, and committing to doing that work as a school district. So if we don't have the empowered students, families, and community members at the table, we continue to see things with the same lens. So when we are prioritizing anti-racism work, we're really prioritizing a culture of belonging in our schools, in our systems, and in our processes. And that's how we as administrators, in my role, can empower others. So I'm really excited about this resolution that's brought to you by our equity team. And I'm ready to commit to this work publicly and collaboratively, and I hope you are as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ella Carr, and I am here to ask you to support our resolution. I'm also very nervous. I am the music teacher at Connors Elementary School, and that means that I see every child and every teacher. And I can see year by year the negative effects that racism has on our students and on our staff. I'm a resident of Ward 4 as well here in Lewiston. The students and colleagues that I work with deserve to know that their schools and leadership support them, and denouncing racism is the first step in that process. I would urge you to support this resolution and make it clear to our students, staff, and community that you denounce racism in our schools and in our community. Thank you.
I'm Maggie Diamond Stanek. I'm not a member of LPS. I'm a parent, and I just want to add the voice as a parent that I hope you'll support this resolution. I would be really proud to send my kids to a school district that would make this kind of statement. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hawa Abdullah, and I am an employee with Lewiston Public Schools. I encourage you all to support this resolution. To see this today, this work happening, it's long overdue as an employee, and I would like to be part of us as a team. And as my colleagues, they're staying here and behind me and support me. And I also encourage you as a school committee member to support this resolution. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is James Ford. I am the Family and Community Support Coordinator for this district. The last time I stood in front of this group was when I was approved as that in that job. And I said Lewiston had a lot of opportunities, and this is one of them. The issue of equity, as I always say, is not a destination, it's a journey. We will never get there, but we need to strive towards there. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. I'm gonna turn it over to the superintendent because I believe you have some words to add. Thanks.
In addition to the resolve that has been shared, and thank you all so much for putting together the video and also being courageous enough to come here today to speak. We also, in your packet, you'll see a working equity statement. And I want to emphasize the word working. And this work continues. And as things have unfolded here this spring, I do want to say that I think that Aisha and I have talked about this as well, but this is a working statement. I wanted you to see it and know that it's in the process, it's in the works. So in addition to the resolve, this is a working equity statement for Lewis Public Schools that my thinking is the next round of this will go and work with the folks that participated with the City Spirit Group. And so the vote tonight is really about the resolve, but I wanted to share this work as in progress as well. And the working equity statement for Lewiston Public Schools at this point in time reads: Lewiston Public Schools is committed to building an educational community in which every member has access to the resources and opportunities needed to learn, grow, and thrive. We explicitly value and affirm the diverse voices, experiences, identities, and contributions of individuals of all races, sexual orientation, gender identities, and expressions, religions, national origins, abilities, ethnicities, languages, immigration status, family compositions, backgrounds, and incomes. Through ongoing reflection and intentional actions, Lewiston Public Schools engages educators and learners in co-creating inclusive, equitable, anti-racist, and culturally responsive learning environments that serve to amplify marginalized voices and challenge systemic imbalances of power and privilege in our schools, our city, and our society. And I know that there can be some processes in choice of words and semantics. We could work with statements like this for very long periods of time. I do think it's worth good process, but we look forward to bringing that statement back to you in the near future to align to hopefully this approved resolve and blending the work of the City Spirit Group and the local internal Lewiston Public Schools group and our equity resource team.
Thank you. Normally, I defer to my colleagues at this table to make motions. As the chair, I feel like I should step back on that. But this one is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I feel very strongly that this is a move forward for Lewiston. So I would like to make a motion to receive and approve the resolution to denounce racism in Lewiston Public Schools.
Second.
So I have a second by Karen Majerus Collins.
Any discussion among the committee? Member Majerus Collins.
So a vote on a resolution denouncing racism should be one of the easier votes an elected official ever takes. And I expect that it will be for all of us on this committee. But I don't want it to get lost in this, the degree to which this statement is revolutionary and radical. Because we live in a city, we live in a state, we live in a country where systemic racism and white supremacy is alive and well. And so, you know, I want to make sure that folks understand that this committee is not just, you know, endorsing words here. We are committed to confronting the evils that systemic racism represents in our schools and in our city, and that is going to necessitate very meaningful changes in how we do business and how society is structured. So I don't want anyone to lose the thread here, that this is a bold step and a radical step.
Ms. Ray.
Thank you. I just want to commend Ms. Hall and the team with her. I wouldn't say behind her, because I think this is inclusive approach to this work as well. I, similar to member Majerus Collins, am just floored by how thoughtful this resolution is to all, to many of the possible impacts of racism and how it comes to fruition in our society, and how it can be explicit or implicit. And as we consider our policies going forward, looking at this equity statement, I think that will be a great help to filtering things through that lens as we move forward. Thank you for this work. I'm excited to support it.
Any other members like to speak? Member Potvin?
So Jake, obviously a necessary element here that needs to be brought forward, but I've always been a person of action. And I guess as we put this in writing, I would be interested, and certainly we've raised issues in the past. We still have a significantly segregated school system, and our issues with the LL and so forth that are being taken care of now, thanks to the people voting for the budget. I'd like to know the action plan. So besides doing this, I think I don't want to see anything just fall off to the side and do it. Let's have an action plan. So I don't know if you have one already to address those particular issues, or if something's forthcoming. It's something I would rather see sooner than later.
So I can share some frameworks with you that work that we've been doing. There's still a couple more steps before the action plan can be fully shared. But I will say this equity resource team has provided inputs. We've looked at foundational aspects, and we've looked at what challenges people have to carry out this work. And there's different things that people will say, even in place of authority, to resist these efforts based on what they're willing to lean into, what they're not. And a lot of times it comes back to, well, we need an anchor, we need a statement, we need a something. But as we continue to do this work, we look at other policies aligning to this framework. We look at professional learning opportunities that align to this framework. We look at instructional models that have an ability to be audited, to be culturally responsive, aligned to this framework. We have professional learning opportunities this summer, already booked, scheduled. People have signed up for it. Our principals and directors and assistants, 2-day sessions in June and also in August. Again, built around this being an anchor for the work that we do. We have carved out time in our professional learning schedule to have district-based implemented items each month next school year, which was recently approved here, but also those chunks of time are specifically being dedicated to, in part, this specific work with educators and support staff. We're also looking at how we can roll out these different learnings and opportunities to have conversation and dialogue with community through our equity resource team. So it's not a top-down piece, it's not a bottom-up piece, it's kind of like a spider web that goes elsewhere. So in a sense, do we have a plan? It's all coming together in a framework. Actually meeting with management team on Monday, hopefully with this resolve to talk about what our anchors are as leaders, because I believe wholeheartedly that our leadership has a higher obligation than anyone else in our community to carry equity forward. And that's the work that we need to continue to do. So do I have it on a piece of paper? Not yet, but you will have it soon. But it's all anchored in this resolve and in the equity statement work.
Ms. Hawkins?
I'm very happy to see this resolve come before us this evening. It's something that I think has been sorely needed in this community, okay, for a long time. And I'm glad to see that first step really being taken. And I do see this as a stepping off point. I'm glad to hear that the work is already underway to build out where this goes from here. I'm going to be watching and will happily step in if you need me, because it's about time. the kids in our community need it.
Any other members of the committee like to speak? Are there any members, participants online that would like to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll go back to Superintendent Langley.
Just real quickly, I want to say that, I currently sit in a chair that is seen as a place of authority. And it is, and I understand that. But with that power, as Tiffany shared, there's also the ability to empower others. And this resolve is not just a statement that gets voted in, hopefully very soon. This says to people that we are committed to this work, that we're willing to be vulnerable, that we're willing to understand our privilege and our authority and execute it in ways that it's on a journey that we improve and make the experiences of our children better. And I'm proud to be a part of it, but I also want to publicly thank Aisha, James, all the folks sitting over here that continue to challenge me in all of our meetings to think deeper and more deeply about my approaches, the way I was raised, and how that influences the decisions I make and how we need to get the right people to the table to keep taking the effort, to keep doing the work. So thank you all.
If there's no further discussion, we will vote. Ms. Ray, can you help me? Are we at all votes starting with you tonight?
Correct.
Okay, so City Council, how do you vote?
Yes.
Ward 1? Oh, wait, me. Yes. Sorry. Ward 1. Can you turn your mic on?
Yes.
Ward 2.
Yes.
Ward 3.
Yes.
Ward 4.
Yes.
Word 5. It's not coming on. Tanya, move your.
Yes.
Word 6.
Yes.
Word 7 is absent.
Motion is approved 8-0.
Like to
Yes.
say something. Although I would love to have Mr. Physick vote and continue on the board, I do want to state that with your resignation, you had to resign before we could vote you in as a basketball coach tonight, and we already did that. And so I just want us to be aware that we can't be employees and still be on the board. And unfortunately, I wish you could, but.
So I had a conversation with the mayor about this earlier today. And my understanding from the charter and speaking with him is that until the new person is appointed, technically, he is still in his seat as the representative for Ward 2. So I don't know, Ms. Ray may have different input on that, but that's my understanding.
I would refer to the hire date on the personal agenda that was approved. I would ask Mr. Physick if he would like to be noted as abstained from that consent agenda vote, since that would be a financial conflict of interest. And I also would recommend that he sit out item 7A, but other than that, he does not become an employee of the schools until Thursday, I believe. So I think he can vote on things that don't have to do with his position would be my guess.
Okay, so his vote. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ray. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. Agenda item number 7, to receive and approve the following field trip requests. 7A is a field trip to Pennsylvania for the LHS boys basketball team.
All right, many of you saw in your packets that this is a team camp trip. One of the former places where I coached at, this was a daily summer event for us for a team camp. And so when I got hired, it's one of the things that I wanted to bring to Lewiston is going on a team camp. We leave on the 24th as a travel day. We stay overnight at a college campus, which is East Stroudsburg University, which is in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. The cost is $190. We come back on the 26th. There's going to be 3 coaches with us and between 12 and 14 athletes. Meals will be provided. Like I said, shelters provided. And biggest thing for this is, number one, is to give a chance for athletes to actually go to a college campus. I think that's important. We play some good competition, and just gives us a chance to kind of just have team bonding and all the things that come along with just kind of being away from home and just almost just having fun. I think so much in sports now, there's so much of, win, and sometimes sports just doesn't become fun anymore just because of all the pressure that goes on. And this is just kind of a fun trip just to have play basketball, enjoy each other's company, and as a new person coming in, a new coach to come in to kind of set some guidelines as far as what I'm looking for out of players. Like I told one of the reporters today, I don't have rules. I just have a value system, and a lot of the value system that I plan to implement is going to be, again, talking a lot of those things on the trip, such as character. Character is a big thing for me. Having respect for each other. A big thing for me is like, we have 5,000 water bottles, when we leave, but you know what, we should have good character to clean up water bottles afterwards, and not just kind of leave the mess for somebody else. Respect. We respect all our coaches, respect each other. So along those lines, trying to start already building that value system within of what I'm trying to get across. Transportation is going to be 3 school vans, and it's pretty much what I have.
Member Whitlow.
I would like to go ahead and approve both the girls and boys LHS basketball field trips.
Are you making a motion?
I am. Did I not say that?
No. Okay.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion among the committee? Seeing none, we will go to vote. Ms. Ray? Oh.
Yes.
Are there any members of the public that want to comment first? Sorry. Seeing none, we will go to vote. Ms. Ray?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2, I'm assuming is going to
Abstain.
abstain. Thank you. Ward 3?
Yes.
4?
Yes.
5?
Yes.
6?
Yes.
And member representative from Ward 7 is absent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Just for the sake of clarity, I think Ms. Ray said it, but I just wanted to, Jake said something to me while in the middle of that. So the consent agenda that Elgin was hired on, we don't vote on that. That is assumed to be approved if we don't set anything aside. And so if it had been an item that we voted on, I would assume that member Physic would have abstained, but because it's not voted on, and he is not technically an employee of Lewiston Public Schools until Wednesday, is that correct? So I just wanted to clarify that all in one statement. And that's why he can continue on this evening. Agenda item number 8, to receive and approve the first reading of policy JHB regarding truancy. Ms. Wright.
Thank you so much. So hopefully this isn't too hard of a conversation. You all have in your packet both a draft and a clean copy of this policy that we have been working on since January. So sorry about that delay. Just a couple of changes that were made. These were to bring the policy into line with state law. Here, Dave, can I share my screen? Okay, great, thank you. Here we go. So the couple of changes, just to note, the age of the student is different in the truancy state law, as is this clause here under C. So is enrolled in a public day school, is at least 5 years of age, and has not completed grade 6. and has the equivalent of 7 full days of unexcused absences or 5 consecutive school days. So that's just bringing us into form. Beyond that, sorry for the weird formatting and my aggressive scrolling. Under Part B here, we changed, as has been our practice in policy, gendered pronouns to non-gendered and changing parent to guardian, just knowing some of the circumstances for families in our district. We also updated Department of Human Services to what it is actually called, Department of Health and Human Services. And then we also just gave some flexibility to the superintendent or their designee about how we notify folks about the truancy. This has been looked at and talked through with Alyssa Roman and Donna Rancourt, who have been handling that process. Although she's the director of nutrition and transportation, we all know that truancy has kind of fallen under that umbrella for a bit. So they've taken a look at this as well. Beyond that, we also changed notification of local law enforcement and authorities. This is not a practice we really want to get into, nor has it been current practice. And so by changing the language simply from notifying and that being sure to be done, we gave the flexibility to the superintendent or their designee. I think that was it. Oh, and we also took that out of Part F as well. So pending first read tonight and a second read, we'll revise the date, of course, and then get this back into the policy manual. Happy to field questions.
Ms. Whitlow.
No question. I just wanted some like little housekeeping. So the first introductory little paragraph before A, B, and C at the top, the last words, he and she, could probably be they.
Thank you so much.
Member Madras Collins.
So I want to ask about that section D at the top of page 4, where we have the change from prior to notifying to the superintendent may notify. I'm wondering if there's any reason we shouldn't go beyond that and just strike the language from that paragraph entirely. I don't really see that there is any role for law enforcement in issues of truancy and school attendance. And I just don't think that the superintendent should be involving them.
While I agree with the sentiment, state law allows for that, and I think might require that. Superintendent or assistant superintendent, do you have?
Yes, it's my understanding that it is part of the truancy procedure by state law does include that step.
So I think my question is that while it may be allowable under state law, my question is whether it's required. And it strikes me that the change in language suggests that it isn't. If the school committee is giving the latitude to the superintendent to decide whether or not to notify local law enforcement, that suggests that there's not a statutory obligation to notify local law enforcement, and thus we could make a preemptive decision that we're not going to do that.
Are there any situations where it's mandatory to alert law enforcement? Like, is that spelled out anywhere?
I'd have to pull the state law up to reference it. But I know that Part D was a pretty involved conversation, and how we landed with the language we have, we felt like it landed within the law, but it did soften the idea that we were going to contact the local authorities to go find students, pick them up, and bring them to school.
I think part of, I know part of the conversation was to allow for us within the policy to stick within the law, but also allow for many of the other options that we use in the district and continue to use in the district to encourage and work with families to bring students to school and get them to school. Very few times in my time here have we ever involved law enforcement in a way that was to penalize the student or family. But there have been times where it's necessary. So I think that the discussion within the policy committee, as well as there's been a group of administrators and school staff that have worked diligently on truancy this year, especially this year because of our circumstances. And so their input to this was considered. They looked at this, gave us some feedback. Alicia had several correspondence. Alicia and the rest of the committee had several correspondence with them as well.
Thank you. Comments from any other committee members? Mr. Damon? Mike?
Make a motion that we adopt the truancy policy as presented and as revised and not change the section D.
Member Majoris Collins?
I'm just looking at the relevant state law right here, and it does look like there is an obligation on the part of the superintendent to report the facts of unlawful absence to local law enforcement at a certain point in this process. So my concerns that I raised earlier are withdrawn, and now I have to raise a different concern, which is it possible that we've gone beyond our purview here, with the caveat that I don't think that should be the state law, but it seems like that may be the state law.
Just a point of order. Was there a second to Member Damon's motion?
second.
There is
Thank
now.
you. Thank you. I just can't hear everything. Would you like me to respond to Member Majoris Collins? So if you are looking at D, hop a couple lines up to number 4. And that is where we satisfy notifying local law enforcement authorities of a violation. When we jump down to D, that is talking about the meeting and whether or not local law enforcement should be there, I believe. I will also say this is not my full-time job doing policy. Alyssa Roman, Don Rancourt, and the members of the truancy committee are the real experts here, and we drew heavily on their knowledge and understanding of this. So we might have to bring that back during second read.
Member Majoris Collins?
So Ms. Ray, I think I'm reading it a little bit differently. Section C, subsections 1 through 5 stipulate the content of a notice to be served by registered mail. So when you made reference to section C, subsection 4, that's just a stipulation that the notice shall state that the superintendent or designee may notify local law enforcement authorities. It doesn't address what I would say was, I found it under 5054-A, section E, but I guess since this is a first read, we can move forward with it. I just would suggest that perhaps that be reviewed. And again, I want to say I don't like the state law here. I don't think that law enforcement should be involved in this, but I do want to make sure that our policy is consistent with it.
Any other discussion? City Council, would you like to vote? Oh, sorry, members of the public. I don't know why I keep forgetting that. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on the truancy first reading? Seeing none, Ms. Ray?
Yes.
I vote yes. Ward 1?
Yes.
Ward 2?
Yes.
3?
Yes.
4? Yes. 5?
Yes.
Ward 6?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Ms. Ray. Agenda item number 9, to receive and approve the second reading of the LPS personnel policy.
We have Human Resources Director Kim Brown joining us this evening. You see in your packets the edits based on prior meetings and conversation and dialogue in and around both language of portions of the personnel policy and also three options for
You connecting that to that?
salary scale. Also in the packet, I shared a recommendation. I'm opening that now. So in the packet, as I said, there's pay scale options built out for your consideration. And my recommendation is to look at proposal A that has 4% at the lower end of the pay scale, tapered to a 2.5% at the top end of the FY21 pay scales. Results in an overall cost difference of $237,908 as proposed. And Brad, do you want to share any further?
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing
Oh.
everything that's being said. I don't have anything to add. The only thing that I want to note with the cost difference that Jake just referenced, when I shared the proposals last time, I used a group of 83 positions just pulled at a fixed point in time. And so this cost shows the effect of the decision, but is not necessarily down to the dollar, because in addition to voting on the pay scales, there are also positions that have been reclassified. And so that would be factored into this as well. So I just want to note that this gauges the effect of the approach that we want to take to compensation, but and for purposes of comparison, it was helpful, especially as we looked at a big spread of them last time. It's not down to the exact dollar figure.
Thank you. Ms. Ray?
I would just like to make a motion to adopt the superintendent's recommendation and fully adopt the personnel policy for 21-22.
Second.
Member Potvin.
Kim or Jake, either one. I remember when you came forward with personnel policy of 3%. And I think one thing that raised my eyes was 3% and how we come to that number and why. And when I took a look at the national cost of living standards, and it's at 1.9%, I was kind of mystified at that. Well, now I'm even more mystified when I see 4% and 2.5%. And I guess I get my immediate question would be, where does 4% come from? I'm just trying to be realistic. Obviously, we went through one hell of a budget cycle, and we got a lot of messaging sent to us. And part of that is do we ever take time to take a focus on where we can save money? And when we're talking about the level of number of employees that we're doing, that sets the precedent for labor negotiations to then take a look at those numbers. And then it trickles on down the line. And honest to God, we're not in any kind of position to be able to take on numbers like this. And I mean, I know there's a deep wanting to upgrade everybody as much as possible. When 1.9% is the cost of living, I can understand those that achieve above and beyond and recognizing them. That should be about 2.5%. And the 2% should be our standard. That's just my viewpoint. In terms of this number that was thrown out, the difference, the financial I assume that's cost and not savings. So as I'm going to speak later as to the finance committee, we have to start taking looks at where we can start saving 100,000 here and 100,000 there. We got gaps coming in the next year, and those were very, very eloquently stated by city council and the public. And this is in no way going to fill a gap. And I think that this is a opportunity. I felt it was an opportunity. That's why I wanted to take a look at and review it more. But it came out not the way I was hoping. And that, the 4% is not a doable number. And the 2.5%, well, that's on the lower end, and really the 2%, I just don't see how we can justify as a public entity continually to give increases well above the cost of living increases. So I guess I would ask is I know you guys already voted on the first reading. Is there a way to take a look at it more to adjust it to some sort of level of the national cost of living? Or is it just too far down the road and everyone's going to stay at 4? And because quite frankly, what I studied this week, I have no idea where that 200,000 is coming to support this. We don't have the money to support next year's budget, let alone increasing another 200,000 in salary. So I'm looking for options here. I'm wondering if there are any.
So the recommendation I carried forward was the least expensive of the 3 options that were built around feedback and input from the committee, and also conversation around at the lower end of the scale where some members of the committee feel that people are underpaid. That's where that 4% is to lift up people at the lower end of the scale.
Member Majerus Collins.
So I want to be clear here that the advocacy for these percentages is not coming from a place of a misguided understanding of what the cost of living is, although I'm not totally sold on the idea that 1.9 is necessarily the reality for every person working for our school system. But it's disgraceful that we have people working for Lewiston Public Schools and living in poverty. That's just indefensible. And so, Member Ray, Member Hawkins, Member Beaupont, and myself, and others, wanted to shift whatever increase that we were going to have down the scale to the folks who make the least, to the folks who are struggling the most, and frankly, to the folks who do the bread and butter work that makes our school system run. It's still not enough. We're still paying people less than they can make at a lot of jobs in this community, but it's a start. So I think there's a moral component here, and I also think, frankly, that there is a reality, right? We are not overflowing with qualified applicants for positions. This committee has talked on a number of occasions about the fact that we have vacancies. We're not able to hire for the positions that we need necessarily, especially towards the lower end of our pay spectrum. And that has real repercussions in terms of the educational experience that kids get. So I think that we need to be realistic about what kind of compensation we have to offer to stay competitive and to attract talented people to work for Lewiston Public Schools and to stay here. And I think the superintendent's recommendation is a responsible one and a good one. And I encourage all my colleagues to vote for it.
Any other discussion? Ms. Whitlow.
Thank you, Mr. Potvin. I agree. I know that Kim has done her job by providing us the information that the board had requested. I have a hard time too. We know that it's not just the 4% or the 2.5%. It's more than that. They also have steps. It's not that percentage. It's more than that. And that's hard to swallow when we all know that the budget's we're going to have a big crisis, but we go to the negotiation table and we continue to give, especially in this time of this pandemic where people don't want to pay more in taxes. So it is frustrating. I don't know what else to do when you have a divided board. Some say give more and some say hold up. I don't know where that middle ground is. I don't. So I applaud you for speaking the truth. Because there's only so much I can say, there's only so much I can do. If my hands are tied and the board tells me, and Bruce, we got to do something, it's what we do. Same with Kim. She's doing what she needs to do. I'm having a hard time with it, and I just don't know where to go. I guess I'm at a loss.
Member Putman.
So I just want to refresh everyone's memory. So moving forward into next year, we generally have $1.5 million of increase on just the regular bargaining, collective bargaining every year for benefits and pay. We're staring at a $500,000 cliff on the fund balance to try to recover that. We're still, looking at almost $1 million to try to recover off of the COVID funds to try to get that out of budget and into somewhere else. And we're staring at another $1 million in state mandate to finish the teacher minimum salary up to $40,000. It's $1 million. So I just want to refresh everyone's memory that this year, the only thing we got was 1.3 million from the state and 400,000 from the city. So the reality is that, I know they've talked about the 55% funding. And that'll be great if it happens. And if there's going to be a formula to have to put that through. I would rather wait to see it happen and us have the funding and then maybe make adjustments to this down the line next year, forever who's here, rather than do it now when we're already facing, we can't pay the bill. I mean, we're literally there, and that's what's going to be getting taken up in the finance committee for next year. State, even if we go up $1 million in state funding, we're still running short. And after this year, you saw what was out there. We almost got hammered by a city council. We did get hammered by a city council. We got 400,000 from the public, 2% increase. So we floated our bill this year by using $5 million in savings. And we're supposed to try to trim that down next year. Or else we're going to be staring at a huge gap the following year. So I just want, I would urge, with that in mind, I'll at least make an effort. I would like to propose an amendment for the upper rate to be held down at 2%. And the lower end of the scale, that 3.5% would be the maximum. Even that's stretching it, but I'm hoping that there's at least enough goodwill on the committee to see what our financial challenges are next year, and at least reduce this and still make it, addressing Kernan's concerns, still make it somewhat reasonable for, increasing salaries.
I'm sorry, what was that lower number? The
2%, the 2.5 to go to 2, and the 4 to go to 3.5.
okay.
Like,
And I guess what would be the savings? I don't know if you could do that off the top of your head here, but Bruce might.
while you're thinking on that, Kim, we're working through it. Is there a second for this, or are we waiting to see if there's a second to get her numbers? Go ahead, Kim.
And I just want to provide some information that was touched upon. These proposals that were put together does factor in the current step that people will get for this year. So when you're looking at those numbers, it's not this number. And then on top of that, the step increase. I did move everybody forward that was eligible in the set time that I pulled the data. So that is included. And just for reference purposes, moving everybody a step and not moving the scale at all is $73,000 increase, or a 1.4% increase over the current year. So that does represent an increase, even if we stayed at zero, which was something that somebody had commented on. So I have that already calculated. So for reference purposes, that's where we would be if the scale did not move at all. But I can, with just a couple of minutes, calculate 3.5 at the top and 2% at the bottom. It'll take me just a few minutes to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Do what?
No.
Okay,
Oh.
yes, I sorry that I misspoke. I can do that.
Is there a second for this motion?
I will second to wait and see what she has to come back to us with.
Okay. Ms. Hawkins.
So I just want to, while she's playing with numbers, I'm kind of in a frustrating situation. I am on the finance committee, so I do see a lot of what what Ron is talking about. Cliffs coming, things not happening. Ambiguity is my least favorite word in the entire English language. It is hell spelled with an A. I know what it's like to live in poverty. Been there for the majority of my life. Technically still am. I would love to see this increase. I also don't want to see the school district cut off at the knees in 2 months when the state decides, well, we said we'd give you 55%. We're going to give you, 30. It's a hard situation to be in, and I understand very much where Ron's frustration comes from. I also understand very clearly what Kieran and the rest of us are trying to do with this. So I know this isn't easy for anybody, and I thank you, Kim, for playing math whiz for us. We really do appreciate it. I think we might need to start a pool for some sort of thank you for Kim.
Member Madeiras Collins.
So, I mean, I don't know about anybody else in the school committee, so I could be alone in this, but I am tired of Lewiston being a farm team for other districts in this state. And I think that if we don't provide competitive salaries to attract and retain good people, that is what we're going to continue to be. We're going to be a place where people come and they spend a little bit of time and then they bolt for somewhere that pays better. And it's incredibly demoralizing when that happens. It reflects poorly on our district and our city. We need to be a place where people feel like they can make their career, making a real difference in the most diverse and complex and amazing school district in the state. And if we're not competitive on salaries, folks will go elsewhere. And so, I would strongly urge folks to reject this amendment for that reason and to stick with the superintendent's recommendation.
Any other discussion? Member Poppin.
Yeah, just wanted to know if you had any ideas on the top of your head where to get the money. Because we don't have enough as it is. Where are we getting the money?
Perhaps our friends at City Hall could do a reval.
Ms. Ray.
All jokes aside, so we have a couple of proposals in front of us, and I realize it's kind of become our thing to make Director Brown chase numbers for us, but the difference between proposal A and proposal B, which somewhat gets at what you're talking about, Member Potvin, is about $3,000-4,000, and so I can only assume that when you take away a bit more, maybe you're doubling that, maybe you're getting to $10,000 of savings. I have to believe that when the budget was put together that, and this is, I mean, I'm guessing here, but because I don't have the line items, but I'm guessing that our chief administrative officer decided to follow suit with past years and went with I believe it's been a 3% increase for the personnel policies year after year after year. I think the effort this year to kind of change the way we're applying that unilaterally to everyone, that might not be the right word, is an effort that we first saw come through a negotiations process. And so we have that team to thank for alerting us to that kind of imbalance that might exist. I'm not sure if that's how the contract worked out, but that's where I first heard and thought of this. And so I'm super glad to see that administration has been responsive and has kind of tipped that to help our lowest earners kind of move up a little bit faster. But I just want to give that, you know, I don't think it's going to be a huge savings to adjust to this amendment. If this amendment goes through, I will happily vote for that, because I do think we need to continue to bring our lowest earners up. Just thinking about businesses locally, one thing we've been hearing a lot is that it's really hard to hire folks right now. People are staying on unemployment because it puts them in a better situation than working some of the jobs available around here. And that's just not acceptable anymore. I think we need to, as Lewiston Public School System, as the school committee, continue to reinforce that we value our workers, our educators, our staff. And I think this probably money is the best way to show that, if you ask me.
Go ahead, Kim.
Do you want me to go? We have referenced past increases a few times, and I have those. Last year was a 3%. The year before that was 2.5%, and the year before that was 2%. So that has been the year over year traditional numbers that just have in passing been referenced. So I just quickly calculated 3.5% at the top. I dropped it incrementally at the same places where I had dropped it before, and it only got me down to 2.25. So I can run more calculations, but on the fly, I didn't want to take the time to find out where it was logical to put in additional breaks there. So I'm happy to do that. But so going from 3.5, dropping incrementally down in the places that I have on all the other proposals, it brings us to 4.17% over the current, which is in dollars, $218,389, which is a savings of $19,519 over proposal A, or under proposal A, sorry. And I'm happy to go back. I didn't want to take up too much time. I can drop that all the way down to 2. I just need to look for some other incremental breaks where it makes sense to treat those positions differently.
So with that in mind, there's still the potential you can drop that down to 2. There may be some additional funding there. And then as Member Whitlow said, it's not just the salaries, but also everything else that comes with it, you know, regarding whatever step you're on.
That's true. These numbers do include the step already. So the step is already factored in.
Yeah.
But then any proportional benefits to income would be affected as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would just close by saying that at this point in time in the year, and we just started, we're not even on our new fiscal budget. Every vote we take has to have some sort of financial savings to it. So even if it's that, and trying to stay okay with this policy that the board wants. So I would just say that unless somebody wants to recommend even deeper, but you know, we have to do something, and I think this is at least a start. So,
Ms. Whitlow.
Yeah, so I have a concern, and I would like to come back to this after we come out of executive session. Is that something that we can do? And I think it will make sense once we go to executive session. I mean, because it may have to do with the executive session. I don't know. I feel like there's information that the board doesn't have, and I need to be clear with them. Jake probably has no idea what I'm
So
talking about.
are you making a move to table it till after the?
Yeah, yes, I guess I would make
Yeah, I'll second the
later tonight.
table.
yeah, so I'd like to make a motion to table this
Second.
until, and do I say until after executive session?
Until later this evening.
Until later this evening.
If I may just ask, do we have all the information you believe you need from Director Brown? So she does not have to wait in this
I
very
think-
warm
I think
environment.
So, yes, I do, I
Okay.
do.
Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Member Majerus Collins.
So we have one executive session on the agenda for tonight. To enter into executive session to discuss a legal matter with counsel. Member Whitlow, do you anticipate the discussion with counsel to be informative on this subject?
Yeah,
So the motion to table is a direct action, I believe, parliamentary. Does that have a
Can
discussion?
you clarify what the motion was? Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
The motion to table this vote until after the executive session.
And that was seconded?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so that takes the series of motions that we already have on the table and lays them both of those down, the original motion and the amendment, and we can deal with those after because this is deemed urgent.
and my apologies, I meant to reach out to the superintendent before this and I completely spaced it. And he may not even know what my concern is. So but I do need to address it, so.
Do we vote on a table if it's an automatic?
Yes, it requires a majority vote, which, how many of us are here? And we need 5 in favor of that.
Okay, Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2,
Yes.
Ward 3,
No.
4,
Yes.
5,
Yes.
6.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1, 7-1.
Thank you. Is anyone opposed to taking a very quick 5-minute break? Okay, we will take a break. Thank you. All right, next agenda item is to receive, number 10, to receive subcommittee updates, starting with the Finance Committee by Member Potvin.
So Finance Committee gets back into action next Tuesday, and we'll be taking up two specific items. One is what I just talked about in terms of where we are, looking at next year in terms of what we have coming in for revenue and what we're already budgeted for expenditure, and to take a look at that fund balance. The second piece is to go over item by item on the $2 million we deferred to the COVID funding, the part, not the one-time spending, but rather the reoccurring items, and to come up with some sort of plan that's going to address the exit strategy on coming off that federal money, either being able to condense it with something else or reorganize it some other way, or tapping into some other funds that we may not have right now, but may be available. So we're going to jump on those two and hopefully be able to present something to you guys that, you can have for some debate and the direction of the committee going forward, not just for us, but for the future committees, so that we're kind of conscious that we're not just doing this for our committee, but whoever comes after, if we're not here. So, and I think it's huge. We got a lot of big numbers that we're dealing with. So, so if we start thinking about it now, it's going to make our budget season a whole lot easier next year. So see what we can do.
Thank you. Next is Facilities Committee, Member Damon.
Yeah, facilities has really not had an opportunity to meet because of the COVID stuff. We were fortunate enough to get our LCIP request funded, and we're looking at how that can impact us on a couple of different buildings. Dingley's one, and the middle school is another. But we'll have more information coming forward.
Thank you. Curriculum Committee, Member Majoris Collins.
So the curriculum subcommittee has finished its review of the entire K-12 curriculum to provide members with an opportunity to review what it looks like to go to school in Lewiston from 5 years old to graduation. And the goal in terms of an output here is to bring to the school committee in either July or early August proposed reforms to improve literacy education in Lewiston, and try to make sure that more of our kids are reading closer to grade level.
Thank you. Next would be the Policy Committee, Ms. Rai.
Thank you. You saw tonight we brought forward truancy, and based on our workshop on student dress code, we'll keep working on policy JICA, which is the student dress code. Other things on the docket include fund balance policy, team sponsorship, which I think might lead to a larger athletics conversation about costs and equity. Trying to think if there's anything else. We definitely want to loop in the finance committee on a fund balance policy. So be aware of that. We might need to have a joint meeting. Yeah, beyond that, we'll just, we also need to go back. Remember Majoris Collins nudged me on this last week, but we are under obligation to go back and review expulsions that factor into policy, and bring forward those changes to bring us in line with, I believe, a resolve that we passed a bit ago. Clearly, I need to dig into that a little bit more because it's escaped my memory, but a couple of things on the docket.
Thank you. And the Negotiations Committee, Ms. Whitlow.
Thank you. Yeah, we're in the middle of the tech staff new bargaining unit. I think it's going well, and we're also in the certified professionals contract, negotiating that. So we are staying busy. We meet, I don't know, 2 to 3 times a week in the mornings before work in the evenings, after work. So we're busy, so we're doing our best.
Thank you. Agenda item number 11, a report from City Council Representative.
Thank you. Quite a few things to leave you all in on. Last Tuesday night, June 1st, we had 2 workshop items. The first was a pedestrian safety action plan. I'd invite you all to view that on the lewistonmaine.gov website. I can also send it around to committee. Part of this was inspired by an unfortunate fatality in the area, and we were talking about ways that we can educate everyone who's using the road and sidewalks. So looking forward to share that with you. The second workshop item was a proposal to create an affidavit of residency for elected officials. And so as we come up upon election season again for municipal officials, those running for city council and the school committee will now be required or may now be required pending approval from the city council to sign that affidavit of residency under penalty of perjury. What else is going on? Let's see. We approved the appointment of Chair Parks to the Public Health Committee. And then we also approved the LCIP bond issue completely. So really good news for the schools there. Tomorrow night we meet. We are talking about moving some funds around a bit to make sure that we have services to support the bicentennial Maine State Parade events. I hope you've all heard that we will be celebrating in Lewiston over the summer. Additionally, which is relevant to us, is the City Charter Review Committee is going to provide an update. There are lots of things that they've been discussing, such as our election cycles and how long terms are. Should we have as many wards as we do, or should we move to at-large systems? There's a lot up in the air right now. And so if you are able to join tomorrow night, that will be probably at like 6:05 p.m. It looks like, and I think it will be a robust discussion.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 12, report from school committee chair. I do not have an update to give tonight. Number 13, report from the superintendent.
I'll try to make this quick, but today was our last student day of school. And we look forward to what I think will be guidelines coming forth as more and more schools wrap up their school year, guidelines from the state around next fall. And we continue to pursue pool testing if that's what's required to change the spacing requirements. And as a kind of a public announcement, I shared recently my letter about some things for next year and our commitment to trying to get back to school, encouraging those who are able to be vaccinated. That is a family choice. And that's down to age 12 at this point in time. And as that letter went out, we also had some folks reaching out to say they had some questions. So I've made a few site visits in our community just to do Q&A with parents and other members of our community at various facilities. And those have gone very well. And I'm very appreciative. But one thing that has come out of it that I wanted to share publicly is questions around remote learning. And from a resource perspective, as we plan to be back in school in full, and the level of need to provide supervision and carry out the work of teaching and learning, we will not have the resources to provide wide scale remote options locally. The state is working on some options if some families are interested in that. That's separate of Lewiston Public Schools. And we do have in our budget process, the 4 ELMS teachers that again, we're using the relief funding to support them. So that is one area in which we look to continue the remote work. But I did want to say so publicly that we've had some parents start to ask questions about, well, I want my student to be remote next year. We will not have the resources to provide that systemically. We just won't have it. Even if we have the funding, we won't have the additional 20 to 30 teachers necessary to provide that learning option for all of our students.
Member Physics.
Just a quick question. I just want to confirm to make sure I got this right. So there will be an ELMS though, is that correct?
yes, this committee, I think, supported strongly what was a good effort this year, and we want to run it with the relief funds. We can go another 2 years and see if that really is something that a future committee wants to support locally.
Member Majoris Collins.
So Superintendent Langlis, when you say that we don't have the resources to support remote for anyone who wants it, I have to ask, given that it looks like we're probably still going to be at the 12-year-old threshold going into the fall, I would really encourage us to be taking an approach that any students who are not yet able to get vaccinated ought to have a remote option. And I would hope that that would be part of our plan going forward, that families who are not yet able to vaccinate their kids because those authorizations haven't come through yet, would have the option to make the choice to continue with remote learning if that's been successful for them.
So I haven't pulled a formal recommendation or taken time to write one to that effect. I imagine at some point I will have to. We don't have new guidelines from the state yet. But I will say that at this point in time, with the information I currently have, knowing our vacancies, knowing how hard it is to hire and get good people in, and that would be an additional chunk of folks that I would steer parents who might have that question at this point in time, until we have more information, to start looking at the state offering for remote education.
And as more information comes from DOE, we'll continue these conversations, and parents will have an
Absolutely.
opportunity to discuss this at future meetings.
Yeah, not a done deal. I guess publicly I would say I'm committed to being at school full-time in person and doing it safely. But there's so much more that needs to unfold from guidelines.
Member Poppin.
Jake, I just want to mention it because I did mention to the families that I would mention it tonight, and that is that there were several that weighed in this week with those very concerns. I think it was more precipitated from what Auburn came out with, that they're not going to be providing remote, and the concerns from the families are, what if there's legitimate health issues that are documented and so forth. So I mean, I guess I would wonder if there's room with the COVID funding continuing for 2 years, if there's some, I would think that would directly be associated with COVID, so it would be covered if we did add temporary positions, to address remote learning for, I don't know. I mean, I got 4 families. I don't know who else is, out there. So, and if there's an opportunity, I certainly would say that we need to take a look at that's still going to be a issue bumbling down the line another year or so until everybody's, all set. So given that we're still in what I think is a flux of transition, that we should at least try to make some sort of accommodation with the existing funding that's available to us. Just want to state that.
No, thank you. I will certainly continue to review it as we go. And do we have the funding through the relief package? I would say that yes, that we do. I think the bigger challenge is hiring staff. And if we don't have, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but if we don't have a full cohort outside of school for remote, it means we have the full cohort here. And I can't have a classroom without an adult in it, so that we can accommodate small things if there's a state option that goes along with it. I'm really worried about the hiring of, again, we have multiple vacant positions annually, trying to get that resolved and or corrected in the budget so it doesn't have all those vacancies as an ongoing effort. So when we eliminate those vacancies in our budget work, which is our intentions, it also eliminates our flexibility to cover both of those things. So I'm not concluded. I just want to make sure that people are aware. And the reason I brought it up is, again, to encourage those who are able and those families who make that decision to get vaccinated 12 plus, because right now that's a multi-dose situation. And then 2 weeks after, and you get to about mid-July and you're at the start of school. And so the time to get vaccinated is right now, if that's your wish as a family.
That's it. Thank you. Agenda item number 14, school committee community announcements. Miss Linnea.
I just, in case anybody didn't see the newspaper or the umpteen other things that have come out, the city did win the $30 million grant for the new construction. If you're interested in looking at what the transformation plan says, it's available at the city website in the economic development section, I believe. It's also available for viewing at the growingourtreestreets.com website. We're very excited for what this means for downtown Lewiston and Lewiston as a whole. It's a long time coming and we're very happy to see it here. On that note, by the end of the month, we're hoping to have a portion of what we're calling Site 2 fenced in on 3 sides, creating what we're calling the PUP, a pop-up park, where children in the neighborhood can actually go and play soccer or whatever, not have to worry about balls and things flying out into the road. I'm trying to figure out how to plan an event for that, but we'll see how that goes. But there will be safer playing space in the Tree Streets relatively soon.
That's good. Ms. Whitlow?
Community Concepts is looking for people to join their focus group. It's a community needs assessment. And really their need right now is to find people who represent people with low income. So if you or anybody you know would like to be a part of that community needs assessment, you could contact me and I could get your information to the right people.
Thank you. Ms. Ray.
Just a couple upcoming events. So the city has announced that the Liberty Festival fireworks will be on for this year, July 3rd. We also approved the Bates Dance Festival for outdoor entertainment at Samard Payne Park in July. The bicentennial parade that I mentioned earlier will be at the end of August. So be on the lookout for more opportunities to gather at a safe distance outside through the city of Lewiston.
Thank you. Agenda item number 15, future agenda items. Member Majoris Collins.
Yeah, this is just stemming from the curriculum subcommittee work. I anticipate that we'll want to bring that forward either, looks like the July 26th meeting or the first meeting in August. I can be flexible on either one. But yeah, that'll be an opportunity to review literacy reforms.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, are you coming with recommendations for that? Is that coming out of committee or?
Yeah,
Committee, okay.
Ms. Whitlow.
Will you be doing any collaboration with the dyslexia subcommittee at all on that?
We can.
I think that would maybe be a good idea. Do you think, Ms. Bucket?
Yeah, so I received an email from Member Collins today with some requests for some information, and so I'll respond to that. And I think we'll probably meet before anything is brought to the committee. So I think that definitely would be part of the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Member Potvin.
So Jake, besides the public weighing in on the budget and the finances, they also expressed wanting to be able to see some sort of regular update with regards to what we asked for this year. So I guess they kind of want to see a progress report on ELL. How what are we doing with the 1.2 million? How is this working? Yeah, are there certain programs that have been established? There new outreach, whatever it is that we're doing with that. Secondly, an update on the special ed audit. Keep us apprised of that and what direction that's going to and what that's going to mean for special ed. And there was lesser, but still interest in both alternative and the homeless program that we have at Longley. So, the people keep in mind, we passed a budget. Quite a few said we were too high, and they're saying they at least want accountability. So they want some sort of progress report if they could on all these items that we've brought forward.
Thank you. Agenda item number 16, to enter into executive session to discuss a legal matter with counsel in accordance with 1 MRSA 4056E. Can either of you, Mike, can do that?
So moved.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? City council?
Sorry, I have a question on it. Is that okay?
Yes, sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
I can't tell if you're nodding or not. I just wanted to ask, is this in reference to the memo received Thursday, June 3rd?
There was a memo sent on this. I would have to double check on the date.
I did share a confidential memo. Yes,
Okay,
it's the only, yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I think so, yes.
Remember, right, it was shared separately.
On that date? Just want to make sure I'm looking at the right documents. Sorry.
What date did you say, the 3rd?
Thursday, June 3rd, 3:48 p.m.
Confidential item is the title, and it was on June 3rd, yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Then yes.
Okay, I vote yes. Ward 1,
Yes.
Ward 2. You have too many mics on.
Yes.
Ward 3,
Yes.
4, yes, 5,
Yes.
6.
Yes.
Motion to go into executive session is approved 8-0 at 8:59.
I now hit the button back on and now they can.
So I don't need to keep the mic on for them to hear?
So Alicia right now can hear you and Dan should be able to hear you.
Okay, but during this executive session, do we have to have at least one of these mics on for them to hear us?
You're gonna, for them to hear you, you're gonna have to use those mics just like you did in the regular meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.